Okay, so our plan of action for today is to make a web page that's going to serve as our participation 3B. Something we, excuse me, something we actually kind of started on Tuesday's class, but I'm going to start with a brand new web page, just hopefully to reinforce that you can start with a brand new web page. And I'm going to kind of simplify, meaning I'm not going to do a couple things that I did on Tuesday. I'm going to try to make things a little bit easier. I'm still going to be using an external style sheet, but I don't think I'll use my, all right. That's what I was trying to take batteries out of smoke detectors because I had one beeping and looked like it worked. But of course, as soon as I put the little step stool away, I hear one chirping again. I don't know how many we've got. Apparently we've got one more than I thought. So So I'll investigate that in just a moment because it's going to annoy the hell out of me. So I'm not going to do a few of those things. I'm only going to use one external style sheet. I don't think I'm going to use any CSS variables this time. So I'm going to try to make it clean. And I do want to focus on a couple of style layout things. Particularly for 3B, I still want to have a photo on one side with a white box next to it that slightly overlaps it. I'm going to do something, I'm going to use a newer technique, something that's definitely going to come up in class called CSS Flexbox. And it's not tough. We're going to do it at a very entry level, but I think that's going to be a better way to accomplish this layout than what I started to do on Tuesday. On Tuesday, I used a technique of position relative with position absolute, which is a good method. And there's a lot of value to that. And we're going to use that again later when we're doing some more complicated web page layouts. But for these two objects side by side, CSS Flexbox is a good way to go. So I've already got my blank page set up. I remembered the head section today. I've got a meta car set. I've got my title in there, and I'm still planning on the page I make here today. I'm still dissatisfied with my current 195 homepage index. So I'm thinking I'd like to do this one. So the goal for the participation is to have our two boxes, one a little shorter, slightly overlapping the one that's taller. And obviously one's going to have a picture and the other one's going to, so I think that's going to look pretty darn good. And then below that, I'm just kind of putting this together in my head. Below that, I'd like to have, since I'm going to use it, and that would be fine for the participation 3B. So I don't think that'll be too stressful. Follow along with me and we'll do that together. And then after that, I don't know if there'll be enough class time for me to do it in class, but then I would like to have, like, for my homepage, I want to have some other boxes of content beneath that section. But we'll get to it. So I've got my web page started. It is a blank set of body tags. Pretty soon I'll type something here that I'll want you to type up so that I can go investigate smoke detectors. The body is blank, and I do have this web page open on my browser, and sure enough, there it is. It is a blank page. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to head over to I got to create a style sheet. I'm referencing a style sheet here. I'm going to change it out. I'm going to call it week 3 dash participation 3B or part 3B. So I named my web page week 3 dash part 3B, and I'm going to name my CSS file week 3 dash part 3B, but it's going to be a CSS extension. Try to be a little bit more organized with my file names, just so I can clearly see where they're going to be. So I need to make that style sheet file. So I'm going to create a new file, save as. This is going to go to my styles folder, and it's called wk3-part3b.css. Now, what you call your files isn't really too critical for me, as long as you know what you're calling your files and you know how to link one file to another file. And when you publish, you do hyperlinks. So don't feel like you have to copy my file names too for this stuff to work. As long as your file names are all lowercase with no spaces, I think it's gonna be fine. And then if you create a naming system that you think is logical to your organization or to your structure, then that's golden. So don't feel like you have to do mine. As you can see, I kind of change a little bit from class to class or week to week, trying to think of something that might be a little bit better, more organized. So I got my HTML file. I've got my CSS file. I'm going to start off in my CSS file over here by creating my reset rule. Does it have to be stored in styles folder? No, it doesn't. Your CSS files do not have to be stored in a styles folder. I do think it's a good practice to do so, and that's why I'm demonstrating that practice. But technically, you can have all of your files, all your HTML, all your CSS, all your images, all stored into one big folder. Customers never know your folder structure. So people visiting your website don't know about your folder structure. So using subfolders for images and subfolders for styles is just a little bit of organization we do as web developers, but it is not essential for it to work. So I'm using some subfolders just for a little bit of organization. In the past, I've had students, they try to get a little bit crazy with subfolders, and they make a folder for week 1 and a folder for week 2 and a folder for week 3. And I think that's a little bit too much, because then the more folders you have, the more upward and over and cross-linking is a little bit more challenging. The more subfolders you use, the more complicated things get, the tougher, the easier it is to make mistakes when doing links and references and stuff like that. So I'm just doing just a few subfolders, but it's not essential. And after that first assignment where I wanted you to create them, you know, like that first participation where I wanted you to do it, I will never officially check your folder structures again. And if you use just one big folder to contain everything, perfectly fine with me. Okay, in this reset rule, margin 0, padding 0, border 0, box sizing, border box. That's my reset rule. Margin, padding, and border are all set to 0 as a default, and I'm using that box sizing property with the border box value. We talked about that on Tuesday. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go right into the body of my page, and I'm going to set a background color that is sandy brown, and then I'm going to, do I want to do anything else there? Yeah, what the hell? I'll do a font family Verdana. That's good. And yeah, I think that's sufficient. I'm pretty confident that's going to work. Maybe it's not. So let's make sure I've got everything written properly. Looks like that is good. Week 3 part 3B CSS. Let me look over at my HTML. Week styles folder, week 3 part 3B.css. That looks pretty good there. Let me just refresh in case that's an issue. Oh, so I must have a mistake somewhere, because clearly my CSS file is not connected because I don't see my background color coming in. So let me come back and check. Does it have to be stored in the styles folder? I'm reading your question now, Denise. Did you see me not stored in the styles folder? Is that my mistake? Maybe that's why you were asking me. And I went on that whole big diatribe about folders and stuff. So that's the first thing I should check, because clearly my CSS is not connected to my HTML. I'm not getting, the link tag needs the rel attribute. Oh, thanks. I'm not actually sure if it does, but you're right. I should have that. We're going to find out soon enough. That's the one fix I'll make, and let's see if that makes a difference. And lo and behold, it does. I know that a typo kept that from working, but honestly, I had forgotten that not putting that in there kept it from working. So fantastic. Thanks for calling that to my attention. Had I not noticed that right away, then the first thing I was going to do is go to File, Save As with my CSS file and make sure that I'd saved it where I thought I meant to save it. And then knowing that was correct, then I would have double checked the syntax here. But that's what's so nice about having multiple sets of eyes on this stuff. So cool, we've got that. Next order of business, I'm going to jump over to my HTML file. Can't get into your styles folder. That is a little bit weird. So yeah, put things all together in one folder. Obviously, if everything's all together, you don't need to make references to that style subfolder there. In the body of my page, I'm going to have a section. And within that section, I'm going to use a div. This time I will do class. No, I'm going to still do IDs here, I think. ID equals textbox. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to have another div. ID equals photo box. There we go. I've got two divs within a section. Give me a minute. I'm going to go find a smoke detector. Who knows smoke detectors? I've only got like 4 or 5 smoke detectors. All of the batteries are out. The little doors are open, so they're just going off house power. I'm still getting that occasional chirp. Anybody know why?
Are they wired together?
I'm assuming they are.
Okay, that's probably why then, because if one goes off, they'll start talking to each other.
Earlier this morning, I did set off the smoke alarm a little bit from a kitchen incident, but that seemed to stop, and so.
Yeah, if they're wired together, I have 3 that are wired together too, and if their batteries are out, they start chirping. I don't know why, but okay. I think it's something that they're wired together.
All right, cool. All right, well, thanks. I don't think I have that many 9-volt batteries on me, so I will have to deal with that later on. Okay, so let's get into this. So that's now there's nothing for me to look at on my web page with this. So, and that's just because there's nothing in these divs. So it's completely blank. So I'm going to get right into styling now. I don't think I've used a section tag before. A section tag is pretty similar to a generic div, but it gives a little bit more purpose. Remember, we use the generic div element when we want to create a block or a section, and we don't really have a defined purpose for it. So I'm using a section tag here, which is a little different, but I'm still using some generic divs inside of those. And I want to be able to visualize these things. So in order to visualize them, borders and background colors are generally a pretty good way to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to my style, and I'm going to take my section. So notice I'm just creating a selector here. Section is my selector. And in fact, I might do this I might have a couple of sections on my page. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a really creative ID. Top section. Because I'm anticipating, maybe not in class, but maybe after class, of creating another section beneath that has multiple boxes of content. Because remember, your index homepage serves a purpose. My index homepage is going to serve a purpose to have a bunch of links to different places. So I need to have that content on there. So obviously, you're not making a new index page with this, but you might be inspired to, who knows? So let me give that an ID because I think I might use another section later on. And so I don't want to style both of these sections the same way. So now that it's got a unique ID, I can go up here and I can write it this way. So if you want to style an element by using its ID, you can write it just like this, hashtag top section or hashtag whatever that ID happens to be. I'm writing it this way, section hashtag top section. And this is a confirmation that not only is the ID a top section, but the tag in question is the section tag. So it's just a more specific way to go. Is it better? Definitely not better. Is it worse? Definitely not worse. It's just a different way to go, being very specific in the CSS rule. I typically don't do that, but I just wanted to show you that you can. So notice there are no spaces in there either. Space means a descendant selector, which came up yesterday and it will come up again soon. But a space actually means something when you're writing your selectors. So I intentionally don't want a space in this example. Now for this section, I'm going to give it an outline that is 8 pixels solid, medium darkish red. An outline is very similar to a border. And I will certainly do some borders from time to time, but I wanted to show you something else. Outlines and borders. Borders work in a bunch of different situations. Outlines work in most situations. Now we can see that my section up there is all scrunched up on itself because it doesn't know how tall to be because there's no content in there. There's no text or images that are in my section. there's no content within the divs that are the children of this particular section. So I've got to start, if I don't want to put content in it right away, then I have to tell the browser how tall I want this thing to be. So I'm going to go to my CSS. And I'm going to say, go ahead and give it a minimum height of 500 pixels, just so I can see it turn into a box. Now, I don't see it happen there. So let's make sure, did I mistype something? I feel like I'm mistyping a lot of stuff today. Did I screw something up there? No, doesn't look like it. Kind of weird. I lost my outline. So let me get rid of that for a moment. All right, it goes back. That's kind of interesting. Let me just try height real quick. That is unusual. Let me try border. Oh, I see the border. What am I zoomed in on? Oh, I'm zoomed in like 200%. I'm going to take my zoom out to like 110. Okay, so I see that. All right, feeling pretty good about it. Let me go back to outline. Ah, interesting. Okay, so what's going on here? This is why I didn't notice it before. The outline was there, but this is a difference between outlines and borders. Outlines are outside of the place where the border is. Now, because I've got my reset rule in there, things are going to the max. And I'll show it to you this way. I'm going to put a border on here, and I'm going to change this to min height. I'm going to change it to something a little smaller, 400 pixels. Okay, so now I've got a border, but I'm going to put an outline too. I'm going to do a border and an outline so you can see them both in action. So that now you can just see this box container. It's that reddish border going all the way around that top part of my page. Now, if I had an outline on here in addition to a border, 8 pixels solid, and I'll do purple, you don't see the edges of the outline because they go outside of the browser display area. You only see it on the bottom. So that's what was kind of throwing me off. Well, gee, well, what if I do want to see both of them? Let me change it out so it really stands out. I'll change it out to white, so it'll kind of stand out a little bit more. Well, if my top section had some margin around it, margin is space out of the border. So if I did something like a margin of 50 pixels on all 4 sides, now I'm going to have space around that entire top section, which means I'll clearly be able to see both the border and the outline. And what I just experienced is probably one of the tough things being a student is I was using that outline property and actually using it correctly, but I still wasn't necessarily seeing it on my web page because of the nature of how I had these things positioned, my reset rule, and the fact that I chose 500 pixels of height and my page was zoomed in 200%. And, you know, there was a couple things going on that even though stuff is being typed properly, it's just not showing up. I promise you that's going to happen to you. You just saw it happen to me. So when those kinds of things happen, look at it for a few minutes. Don't look at it for 2 hours. But then maybe get me involved, get another pair of eyes involved. Say, Ralph, I'm just trying to throw this outline on this object. And for some reason, I don't think it's showing up. It looks like it's typed properly. And then if 2 of us are looking at it, I bet we're going to find out what's going on. Okay, so I'm okay with that for now. I'm going to leave those on there as they are, but I want to see the divs that are inside of this particular section. So I'm going to do section. I'm going to write it this way: top section space ID text box. That's overkill. I don't want to overwhelm you with it. That's not necessary. So let's just do it this way. My text box. And that is what I called it, right? That is what I called it. I've got my text box and I've got my photo box. Okay. So I've done a couple of things which allows me to visualize that top section on my page. Now I'm going to do a couple things that allows me to visualize the text box and the photo box. Now my text box, just starting off, I'm going to give it a background color that's very light. I'll do capitals. I like to do capitals there. So my text box is going to have a color that's very light. Now my text box is currently empty. It doesn't have any content. So when that happens, it collapses on itself, which means even though I've given my text box this light background color, if I go to my page, I can't see where it is. If I give my text box a minimum height, in fact, I'm going to give it an exact height, 250 pixels. Now my text box is going to have a very precise height, 250 pixels. Now I can really see it. Stands out to me pretty obviously. Notice though, it's also the full width. Divs, sections, they're both block elements. Block elements will always try to be as wide as they can be unless you tell them otherwise. Well, what if I don't want it to be as wide as it can be? Well, then I set something like a width of 50%, and now it's going to be narrower than it is naturally. So if something is bigger than you want it to be, make it smaller with width, make it smaller with height. If something is not as big as you want it to be, then make it bigger with width and height. You get to control that. You can break away from those default characteristics. If I press the button, I'm just reading a little note here. If I press the button on mine, they will be quiet. Oh, you're talking about the, yeah, cool. All right, I will try that next, see if that happens. It doesn't display as a box with min height. Let's find out. I thought it would, but I've been wrong before. Okay, I think it should still display that way. So double check that spelling on min height. Min height should give it some height. So why use min height versus height? Basically, min height will give it a height, but also allow it to get taller if it ever needs to be. Whereas height gives it just a height. And if it needs to be taller, it won't be taller. So height is a very precise value, whereas min height is obviously a minimum that gives you options for bigger. There are times when I would use a specific height. For instance, in the header bar of the Apple website. If you know for a fact that a part of your web page doesn't need to get taller, then using a fixed height is perfectly fine. So the dark bar at the top of the Apple site, that doesn't need to grow. There's no risk of new content going in there. So using a fixed height on something like that is perfectly reasonable. Whereas I don't want to put a fixed height down here in the footer block because somebody may come along and add more content. There could be something that requires it to stretch a little bit taller. So this might be an area where I would put min height, but the header bar at the top, I would use height. Is there a danger of using min height there? Yeah, maybe not. Probably not, actually. Yeah, maybe with that would be an issue. So if there's some content in there which shows up and expands, then using min height might be problematic. So that's why height would be good up there. Okay. Let's jump back over here. Feeling pretty good about that. I want to be able to see my photo box as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a background color of sky blue, a min height of, let's see, what do I want to do? Let's do 400 pixels there. A width of 50%. Let me just check that. My width didn't show up. Oh, there it is. It was just going a little slow. Cool. So do that for a quick second. Let me press a few buttons. All right. Okay, Marshall, if that works, you're going to get some kind of extra credit. I don't know what, maybe automatic A in the course, or those beeping alarms, they just drive me crazy. Okay. How are those styles working? It is. Yeah, I know it is. And I feel like I have to change those 9-volt batteries more often than twice a year. But I will put 9-volt batteries back in. I just need to go make sure I go get 4 of them. I think I've only got 2 right now. So there are my two divs. I've got the white block. It's 50%. 50% of what? 50% of its available space. So a block element trying to be as big as it can be. If a block element is inside of a parent element, a block element will try to be as big as its parent. So I'm making both of these block elements be 50% of their parent's width. And their parent is my red bordered section. Now you'll notice they're one on top of the other. That's the natural behavior of block elements. Block elements like to be on a row by themselves. So in order to create the look I want, I need these blocks to be side by side. On Tuesday, I used a technique with a position property, position absolute within a relatively positioned parent. And we'll do that again, but not today. This time, I'm going to use a technique called Flexbox. It's very cool. And to use it at the basic level is not very complicated. So I'm going to go back to the rule that controls my top section. Can I show the border code again? My border code is right here for my section top section. I've got a red border, 8 pixels solid, and then I've got an outline that's 8 pixels in white. Oh, don't forget, I did put a margin on there. The margin on there will help visualize both the border and the outline so they won't be all scrunched up to the sides. Oh, yeah, that's right. Let me do this. I'm going to take, in fact, I'm going to take all of the CSS I've got so far and pop that into the chat box. There we go. That is all of my CSS in the chat box that I have so far. And not showing everything else. Yeah, with the HTML. Yeah, let me just do the body section. So I'll just go from body to body, copy, and paste. There we go. Yeah, this is not a habit of mine, so I'm not going to always remember it. But if you just post in the chat, hey, Ralph, can you put your code in there? The IDs are case sensitive. Yes, they are. They are case sensitive. Yeah, I normally don't do things this way with what's called camel case, but because I'm teaching a JavaScript class at the same time, I figured, it kind of makes sense there. So, and a lot of web developers do use this kind of camel case kind of spelling where they mix uppercase letters in with the lowercase. Okay, so let's see. What am I doing here? I want to get those blocks side by side. So here's how I'm going to do it. In the rule that controls my top section, I'm going to write display flex. I'll put a comment in here because this is new and it's quite important. Display flex. This makes the block a flex parent. So by putting display flex on my top section, it's going to make it a flex box parent. And of course, the children within this parent are going to be affected by this. So the display property actually has quite a number of values. We will use more of them, but for now, we're just using display flex. And just by putting display flex on that parent, when I look at this, look at those two blocks side by side. So this one little declaration of display flex gives us a pretty cool result. It allows us to take block elements, which are normally one on top of the other, and put them side by side. Now, I happen to have two different block children within this section, but we would have had the same reaction had I had 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. So whenever you see a web page where they're doing like 6 boxes side by side or 2 boxes or 10 boxes side by side, this is one of the common ways of doing that. There is another way called display grid, which I think we will look at later in the term. Display grid is a little bit newer than display flex. So I think a lot of sites do this, but flex is pretty darn nice. It's also got some great characteristics to make it easily responsive on a mobile device. We will definitely play around with that in a future class. So display flex is all it takes to get those boxes side by side. Now you can see my boxes are now completely filled up in height. They both look like they're the same height, and I didn't code that. So what I might do now for my text box, what if I just got rid of the min and just said I want it to be exactly a certain height? Now it's definitely shorter. So by putting in that height, I'm really telling the browser, I want that text box to be only 250 pixels tall. I'm going to go to my photo box, and I'm going to make it exactly 400 pixels tall. That doesn't have a noticeable effect because that's probably close to what it already was, I think, because my section here, my top section had a min height of 400. So I've got those two side by side. I'm pretty happy with it, actually. Didn't require too much work. Display flex, that's a neat key declaration that you might be using multiple times. It could come into a lot of web projects from week 4 on. All right, pretty happy with that. Got those two side by side. However, I do want the white box to be a little bit lower, and I also want it to be a little bit more to the right. So what I'm going to do now is use another declaration, but this time it's going to go to my text box. My text box is going to have the transform property. I like the transform property a lot. It's a little bit weird, and it's a little bit more maybe intermediate level, not beginner level, because it's got some pretty good controls and things. I used the transform property very briefly, I think on maybe our first class or maybe our second class. I used the transform property to slightly rotate a block. Okay, well, I'm using it again, but this time I'm not going to rotate. If I did want to rotate, I could, though. I could rotate -10 degrees, and now that white block would be rotated. Or I could rotate it a +10 degrees, and it would rotate the other way, clockwise. I never remember which is which, so I usually try one and then try the other. But I don't want to rotate today. I could skew it. I could skew that block. Are you going to even notice it there? Ooh, I don't think you're going to notice it there. Ooh, do I do degrees? Ah, there it is. There's a skew. So I could skew it, but I don't want to skew it. You could also skew it and rotate it and do some wacky stuff. No, my goal is not to rotate. My goal is not to skew. Instead, I want to translate. Oh, good. I'm glad, Kelsey, I'm glad you got those back. I do want to translate. Now, when I translate, I'm going to translate in 2 directions, the X horizontal and the Y vertical. This is how I'm going to write that. I'm going to translate X horizontal first, and I'm going to put in 100 pixels, comma. Now I got to do the up and down, and I'm going to do 75 pixels. I'll come back and explain why I picked these numbers in just a moment. But let me test it real quick. Cool. I like it. I like it a lot. So the translate value, really it's a function. Whenever oh, it's chirping. Oh, I made it angry. It's chirping constantly now. Translate is a function because it has those parentheses. Whenever you see these parentheses, and have I used too many? A couple yesterday. Like background image, URL. That means it's a function, so we put parameters in there. But basically, I'm translating, and I'm moving this block, this text block, 100 pixels to the right and 75 pixels down. Now, the reason I picked 75, 100 was just personal preference. The reason I picked 75 was intentional. That's because the height of my text box is 250. The height of my photo box is 400. That's a difference of 150. 150 divided by 2 is 75. And so by picking 75 as my translate Y or down value, it gives me equal amounts of space above and below. Just thought it looked better that way. Okay, so that's why you have to take your math class. There's hardcore math in these kinds of web development things. I had to subtract one number from another, then I had to divide those numbers by 2, And that's probably as hardcore as it's going to get, though. I'm pretty happy with that. But here's something I don't know if I'm happy with this. I don't like this big space over here on the left of my white text box because it's out of balance. I don't have that same space on the right, but I've got this big space over here on the left. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to go to this text box and I'm going to put in a margin left, a margin only on the left. And the margin I'm going to pick is negative 100 pixels. You can use negative margins. And the impact this is going to have is going to be to tack on, basically, it's going to make that text box wider. It is now 50% plus 100 pixels. And that gets it all the way over to the left. So my text box technically is a little bit wider, 100 pixels wider than my photo box. Since my text box was overlapping the photo box, I wanted to account for that extra space. Now you could be thinking, but Ralph, I'm not bothered by that at all. I think it looks good like that. It's a little bit off center, but hey, I'm not as OCD as you are. I'm okay if stuff is off center. Well, fine, then you leave it like that. Occasionally, you're going to be working on some web page layout or design technique, and you're just not going to know how to do it. And that's fair. That's what happens, right? You're like, Ralph, I got this one box over here. I got that. I'm happy with the colors. I really just wish this one box went all the way to the left. Okay. And those are the kinds of questions which get us talking and finding out, oh, well, here's a way you can do it. Margin left is a way to do it. There's another way to do it too, though. I could go, ooh, will this work? I was thinking border left. What if I put like border left, 100 pixels, solid. Let me do yellow. At first, I was thinking that might work, but I don't think it is going to work. Yeah, because I have that box sizing declaration. This is sometimes I've used borders for an illusion like this, but it doesn't quite get me what I want. And if I had content in there, it would still be problematic. So border left, that's a no-go for this situation. Now we could do this too. I could, instead of a width of 50%, this might be kind of neat, actually. I might even like this better. I could do a width using a calculation. There's a calc function. I could do 50% plus 100 pixels. Never done that one before, but I think this will work. I think I've written it properly. Everything is saved. And it still thinks I've got that yellow on there. Oh, I've got that border left still going. Get rid of that. Huh, it didn't seem to do what I was hoping. So I guess that didn't work. And I don't think the spaces hurt me. Ooh, that broke a whole bunch of stuff. All right, scratch that plan. Go back to 50%. I guess margin left is the way to go. No, yeah, good question, Marshall. You don't. Basically, it's using that 50% is based off of its parent container. So my text box has a parent, the section tag, so it's 50% of that. So let me put that margin left back in there, negative 100 pixels, just as well. Gives me an opportunity to demonstrate a negative margin. And that gets to what I want. Hey, look at this. I got that big space over there now. I don't think that was there before. Or if it was, I didn't notice it. I didn't see the refresh on it. So, all right, this is crazy. Let me get rid of this. Refresh. That looks pretty good. Negative 100 pixels. Oh, it is moving over, but it is impacting this space over here. That actually surprises me quite a bit. Okay, so what if I did something like need a margin right on the image now? I could do that, Jason. You're right. I could start putting a margin right. However, my only concern with that is I'm is I'm creating an issue with one CSS declaration and then trying to counteract it with another declaration, which is not bad. And sometimes you're going to have to do that, but I would prefer not to unless I really have to. I don't want to create one mess and then have to do something else to alleviate that mess. Instead, I'm going to see if I can just make less of a mess. So maybe my margin left shouldn't be negative 100 pixels. What if it was margin left negative 50 pixels? Now I'm going to get some balance on the left and the right. Now you could be thinking, all right, well, that looks pretty good too. The right margin could be the thing to get that trick going on. Now, don't forget, both of these boxes, their widths are impacted by this section. So if my section was wider, then these boxes would look wider. If my section was lower, these boxes would look lower. The only reason it stands out to you at the moment is because my section has visible borders and visible outlines. If I comment out the border and I comment out the outline, you're not even going to see the top section. It's there. The top section is being used in order to manipulate the children, but you can't visualize it on the web page. So the top section still has value, even if you don't put visible things on it so that you can see it. When you're looking at other people's websites, that's the toughest thing to understand when you're just looking at the page, trying to figure out how did they get that layout? Where are the containers? I will show you this little trick. I'm going to go to Apple and I'm just going to throw on a layout here. So I just overlaid the Apple site with a bunch of outlines so that you can kind of see where these little boxes are and kind of makes it easier to visualize. Notice practically every box is the full width until we get down to some of these other sections down in here. And then we see a whole bunch of them. So that comes in, that's pretty handy. Let's look at something else. NOAA.gov. Go to my little layout tool. There we go. So now you can start to visualize where these boxes are. So there's a box over that picture that's the full width, but then there's a text box, which looks like it's about 50% of the width. And then there's the headline text, which is within that 50% box. There's those three boxes side by side. Flexbox is good for that. And then even down in the footer, there's three containers that are side by side. Flexbox is good for that as well. So kind of a neat little tool. And Marshall's letting me know the calc needs a space to function. Yeah, so back when I was writing that, 50% space plus, and then the 100 pixels or whatever I was trying there. I think it was my, yeah, maybe I was expecting more from it than what I was getting or something like that. So I will use calc again, I think. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. Not done yet. I do need a picture in there. My goal was, I got a little tied up. I went to work first, and then I realized, oh crap, we're getting a delivery at home, so I had to rush home and stuff like that. So part of my plan was I was going to go to my own Google Photos and find a picture I took this summer to use, but don't have time to do that now, so I'll do that later. So I'm going to jump out to Unsplash and find another picture that I can use for my homepage picture. And let's see, I'm going to search for, let's see, what if I just searched for Oregon? What am I going to get? A lot of great photos here. Again, I'm going to get a landscape shaped picture. It's a cool picture. Portland there. That's a pretty nice little outdoorsy photo. The coast. Oh, that one looks good. I like that waterfall picture. That's the one I'll go for. I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to download the small version. And there it is. I'm going to save as. I'm going to make sure, oh, good. This is already in my images folder. It's in my 195 folder. I'm happy with that. So I'll go ahead and call that waterfall. And it's a JPEG. I'm not going to change the extension. So now I've got that waterfall picture saved. Good. I'm happy with that. Now I want that waterfall picture to be in the background of this section. Now this is where it would really tickle me pink if you worked a little bit ahead of me on this one. So ultimately, I want that background image to be where this block is on the right. Okay, so that is my photo box. I've already got a rule for the photo box, but what are you going to write in there in order to get that image to display? Think about it, give it a try, and I'll catch up to you in just a moment. Will somebody type in the chat, which CSS property are you writing? What are you writing in order to get this background image displaying? Perfect. So Grady's got it there. It's a background hyphen image. Technically, you can just do background. Background is a shorthand property. It does several things. I don't typically use that in class, but you might see it on other websites. I'm going to do background image. URL, which means it's a function because it's got those little parentheses on there. And then let's see, I need to go .. slash. I need to go upward in the folder tree and then into my images folder slash and then to my waterfall picture. There we go. And my waterfall is showing up. I don't like that it's starting to tile there, but a little fix I can do for that. If I just take this background image and then I do background size cover, I think that'll take care of it. And background size of cover is going to stretch or shrink this image appropriately so it fills up the available space. Yeah, looks good to me. Okay. All right, looking good. I do want to put some text inside of this text box. Remember, this is going to be kind of like the home page for my 195 website. It may not be your home page. That's okay. But it's definitely our participation 3B. We're almost done with it, really. We just want to have a little bit of styled text. And I do want to create a button in there, a hyperlink button. So I'm going to jump back over to the HTML, and I need to put some content in my text box. My photo box text technically doesn't really need any content. So even though the photo box is a pretty important part of my page because it's displaying that image, I don't really have to put anything in between the opening and closing div tags of that photo box. It's just there to have space, to have depth, width and height and stuff like that, so that that image displays. However, my text box, I do want content in there. Let's see, I want a heading 1. And this is going to be CIS 195 web development I. I'll do a number 1, web development 1. And then after that, I'm going to do a paragraph with my name. And then after that, I'm going to do another paragraph with welcome to my web dev portfolio homepage. Please enjoy yourself. Out a variety of assignments and experiments, period. Alt-Z to word wrap. There we go. That's my little welcome paragraph. I'm happy with that. Now, after that paragraph, I'm going to have an anchor tag. And it's going to go to, where do I want it to go to? I don't know where I want it to go to. It's going to go to my email. That's what I'll do. Mail to : rrphillips@csse.edu. Class equals I'm going to call it a button link. There we go. Okay, so within my text box, I've got quite a few things going on in here. I've got a heading 1. That's the page title. Then I've got a paragraph right after that. That's going to be the subtitle, I suppose, for the page. I'm going to style this paragraph with my name differently than this little paragraph here with my text. And then I've got this anchor tag. Now I've given this anchor tag a class called button link. If I reuse this class, and I'll show you what this means here in a little bit, or maybe after class, I'll keep the recorder going if you got to head out. And I'll use this class multiple times, and I'll end up making several buttons. So now that you're actually starting to see part of this page, just as to let you know what my intention is after class today, is I'm going to finish this up, and that'll be our participation 3B. Then we'll call that good. And then I want to have 4 boxes right down here at the bottom. And I might put 4 different pictures in there. I can do the pictures later on. That's no big deal. I'll do one of them with you so you can see what I'm doing. I want to have 4 boxes down here. And then I don't know what I want to have in them. I don't know if I want to have like a little list of hyperlinks but I want to use some buttons in there, calls to action. So I want to have some other content down here. I don't want this to be a really tall homepage, but I want this section up here to look decorative, have the main content in there. And then I want 4 boxes of content down here. Maybe I'll go 5 boxes. Who knows? It'll be easy enough to add more. So that's coming up. However, before I can worry about those 4 or 5 boxes, I need to style this content. So the technique I'm using here is structure first, style second. So I'm putting in the HTML and the content first, and then I'm going to go over to my style sheet and style it. You know, if you're going to build a shed, you got to put the walls up and the structure before you start worrying about paint colors and things like that. So structure first, then style. So we've got, not doesn't mean I'm not going to go back and change structure sometimes, but get the content on there first, get a feel for it. Great. Now I want to start styling this up so that the text looks good in there, different sizes. I'm not going to go through fonts right now. And then I want a nice big button, you know, really obvious, called a call to action. Most websites you go to will have a noticeable call to action, maybe 1 or 2 of them. Calls to action are typically styled to look like little buttons. And because people like clicking on buttons and they like bright colors. So if you see a bright colored button, you're just dying to click on it, I know. And so that's why I want to do my button also, or my hyperlink also styled as a button that entices you to click on it. So here's a website where they've got a fixed header up there. That's pretty neat. Hey, look at that. This is where I got the idea, by the way, for the 1 box overlapping the picture. So that was a stolen idea, I suppose. And we're going to jazz our, oh, there we go. There's an example too with a little button. So a lot of cool little techniques you can just, you know, try out for yourself. And we're not copying their code. I didn't even look at their code to see what they did, but I do like the look, especially on this one. I don't like it down here just because this picture looks funky. But I like it this way. I like the text on there overlapping the picture. So on the participation 3B directions, the picture that I put up there is the example. It's from this website. So, okay, that's what I want to do. And look at all these little buttons. Just want to click on all of them. Okay. I'm going to style the headline first because I like to style stuff in the order that it appears in that particular section. So let's work on that headline 1. I got to stop doing that and jump over to my code. It's a H1 within my text box. So here's where I want to do this. Text box space H1. Now, this is a descendant selector. I'm styling the headline 1 that's within my text box. Now, if I just used headline 1, it would probably work pretty well. However, if I had another headline 1 somewhere on my web page, which is rare, but sometimes happens, if I had another headline 1, I don't want that headline 1 to get styled the same way. So I'm making sure that I'm really specific and I'm styling the headline 1 that is within my text box. And that headline 1 is going to be text align center and font weight normal. I'm going to do those two things. I put my declarations on the same line just to kind of conserve vertical space. Whenever elements are really closely related, like width and height and width, I often will put those on the same line in my CSS, even though it's not necessary. Okay, and that should be it. Okay, so it's centered, and I'm going to get rid of the bold. There you go. It's centered and it's not bold. I'm not letting my eyes get distracted by the other content. I'm only looking at that H1. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of margin. I'm going to do 8 pixels of margin top and bottom and 0 pixels of margin left and right. Top, bottom, left, right. So when I do 2 units of measurement with my margin property, that's what it means. Top and bottom, left and right. And that's just going to give me, actually, it wasn't that noticeable. I'm going to jazz it up a little bit. Let's go 12 pixels. There we go. A little more space above and below my H1. All right, feeling pretty good about that. Yeah, I like it. That's good for now. Check this out. Text box H1 plus paragraph. This is a combination descendant selector and adjacent selector. So you've seen a descendant selector. That's when you just do one element space another element. The plus makes it an adjacent selector. It means it's next to it. So basically what I'm styling now is the paragraph that is adjacent to my heading 1. What about the paragraph down here? It's not going to count because it's not adjacent to my heading 1. Only one paragraph is next to my heading 1. And so that allows me to style that paragraph differently than any other paragraph. So that paragraph is also going to be text align center. And for my color, I'll make it sandy brown. It's probably going to be tough to see on that white background, but come on, refresh. That looks pretty good. Text align center, color, sandy brown. Doesn't look like it likes that. So let's see if I made a mistake somewhere. I did make a mistake. Before I can even look over at the chat, Denise has pointed it out to me. Thanks. Yes, case sensitive text box. Perfect. Thank you. I don't like that color, so I'm going to change it out to hashtag 789. It'll also be tough to see, but that's okay. Okay, now I want my name to be a little bit closer to the heading text, and I want there to be more space on the bottom. So for that paragraph, I'm going to do margin. Let's see, I'll do 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 20 pixels, 0 pixels. I'm using 4 units of measurement with my margin property now. It's top, right, bottom, left. When I use 4 units of measurement, start from the top and you go clockwise. So I pretty much have 0 top, 0 right, 20 on the bottom, 0 on the left. Now you could be wondering, oh, Ralph, why not just do margin bottom? It's because I did that in another class and I wanted to show you this. So top, right, bottom, left. And that basically gives me a little bit more space. Now, if I want my name a little bit closer, well, now you know, well, instead of 0 for that top margin, what if I did like -10 pixels of top margin? That gets my name closer to that headline text. And while I'm here, I'll do a font size of 1.4 ems. I'm not using root M today, REM, because I never set a font, a root font size. So I'm just using regular M's. I'm actually okay with the size of my name, but I don't like that it's almost as big as my headline text. So I'm going to go back to my headline text and do a font size of 2.2 ems. And I'm okay with that. So, all right, feeling pretty good about it. All right, next order of business. I've got regular paragraphs within my text box. Okay, so here's what I was going to do. I was going to style paragraphs within my text box. And that's not a bad way to go. However, by styling all paragraphs within my text box, my name paragraph up here would also be a little bit impacted. Now, I wasn't going to do much, but I was going to do enough that I was worried about the impact on it. So I think it's still going to be okay. It'll give me an opportunity to show you how to counteract something. So I think I will still do this. I'm going to style all paragraphs within my text box in a certain way. I'm going to give them some padding, and I'll do padding of 1em. Padding is similar to margin, but padding is inside of the border. Margin is outside of the border. Now, I did padding intentionally here, and when I go to my page, I want you to look at just my paragraph of several sentences. Don't look at the other paragraphs or anything like that, because I want to show you, I want to focus on that one. So when I've got a padding of 1em, let's refresh, come on. All right, that's screwed up somehow. Again, with my lowercase b. There it is. So I'm just looking at this paragraph, and notice I've got some space around that paragraph. You see it on my lines of text there, a little space around that paragraph. Especially you'll notice it on the left side right there. Now, if I didn't use padding and instead I used margin, it's actually going to look the same. So even though I know the location, it looks a little higher now and stuff like that. So over here on the left, many situations, margin and padding can get you the same look, especially when there's no visible border. However, margin and padding sometimes have different impacts on surrounding content or adjacent content. So you just try one and then maybe try the other, and you see which particular version is getting you the look that you want. And sometimes you're going to use both margin and padding depending on the situation. So in this example, putting a margin of 1em around my paragraphs, I'm actually pretty happy with. So I think that's going to be fine for me. However, my lines of text are too close together. I want to separate those lines of text. So I'm going to do a line height of 1.5. That's pretty good. How's 1.8 look? I like it better. Now, you're not really noticing this, but what I'm doing right now is affecting my paragraph up here with my name. And I'm seeing that impact, but I'm not dissatisfied with it. So I'm not too worried about counteracting it or anything like that. So on my paragraphs, they now have a 1em margin on all sides and a 1.8 line height. And I think that is okay. Now, last on the list for participation 3B is to make this little email me hyperlink look like a call to action, to look like a nice, obvious button. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. And this is actually a really common thing to do in websites. So I definitely want you to get this technique down, and you'll be able to reuse this technique many times whenever you want a call to action, a button. So my hyperlink has a class. Class equals button link. I have to make a mental note. I have a capital L in there. Button link class. Remember, class names and ID names, no spaces. But you can use uppercase letters apparently. So class equals button link. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new rule, dot button link. Okay. So dot button link. And I'm going to style this with easily half a dozen declarations. First thing I'm going to do, so that we can really see what's going on, I'm going to put a temporary border. I might not use a border. I might get rid of it later, but I'm going to put a border. It's 2 pixels, solid and red, just so we can visualize what's going on. So I'm going to put a border on my class equals button link. Notice I'm using a dot instead of a hashtag. Class selector uses a dot. ID selector uses the hashtag, the pound sign for those that are my age or older. I could have used an ID instead. In fact, Jason, this is an example, though, where the class is the better way to go. It is perfectly reasonable that a website is going to have multiple buttons, multiple calls to action. And so using an ID for this is actually the wrong way to go, even though you could have done it. In this example, I like class because now we can apply the same class to 5 different buttons and they're all going to have the same look. So class is good in this situation. You use ID when the element's only going to occur once per page. Use class when there's a chance you might use it multiple times per page. Okay, and you can see that red border. Now, the next thing I do is going to be kind of interesting, and I can tell they're not doing it over at Get Karen, so maybe I don't want to do it that way. Now, what I was going to do was I was going to convert this hyperlink into a block element. I'll show you what I was going to do, but then I'm going to get rid of it. Display block. You can convert a hyperlink, which is an inline element, into a block element, like a div or a paragraph. So basically, just by putting display block on my hyperlink, look at that red border. It goes all the way across now. Whenever you want to make a button or a hyperlink that takes up the full width of the parent, that's a really good way to go. Now, I like that idea. I like it a lot, and that was actually going to be my intention. But just a second ago, when I was looking over here at the Get Karen website, notice how the gift button is narrower than the check it out button. Since they're using that same button class multiple times, sometimes with one word, sometimes with several words, by making it a block element, I take away my ability to have a flexible width button. And I like that feature. So even though I do this in many situations, especially for navigation menus, and let me make a little, I'm going to comment it out. Display block, which basically is converts anchor into block element. But I'm not going to do that today. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some padding on this button. I'm going to do 12 pixels top and bottom, 24 pixels left and right. What is it? It's Control/ for the comment out command. So CTRL +/. So by putting this padding on here, this is going to allow my button, come on, where is it, to be a little bit more flexible in the width. If I had more text in my button, then my button will look wider because that text in there. Okay, feeling pretty good about that. I'm going to get rid of that bogus text. Now that border is probably still going to go away, but I'm going to keep it on for a little bit longer. So I've got the padding on the button. I'm pretty happy with it. I would like this button to be centered. Well, there's a way to do that. And this button is standard text because it's an inline element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my text box rule, and I'm going to put text align center. Oops, that's not the right one. Cut that. I'm going to put text align center on my text box rule. And this is going to center everything within that text box, even something that I don't want to center. So it's going to center everything in my text box. However, I didn't want to center this regular little paragraph here. So in this example, I'm going to go to my regular little paragraph rule. It's right here, text box paragraph. And I'm going to put text align left. So I've created a conflict. I'm having to counteract that conflict. I want that paragraph to be to the left. Yeah, that worked actually. I was actually wondering if it was going to impact my paragraph up here, but I had a plan B for that one. So looks like I'm okay. So basically everything in my text box is centered except for my regular paragraphs. All right, feeling pretty good about this. I'm going to go back to my button link and I'm going to put a little margin top of 20 pixels. Is that going to work? I don't think that's going to work. Because it's an inline element, it doesn't have the same relationship. So I'm going to have to do it this way, I believe. Actually, I can't really push it too much because remember, my little header, my little text box is only 250 pixels tall. I'm actually starting to run out of space there because if it goes taller, it's going to mess up my balance on this overlap and I'd have to do some more hardcore math. So maybe I'm okay with this, but I will do this. I'm going to ease up on the padding there and I'll do 8 pixels top and bottom, 16 pixels left and right, make it a little bit more subtle. Now, while I'm in here, I'm going to get rid of that margin top, text decoration none. I'm going to get rid of the underlining on that button. Don't need that. Background color orange. Come on, there it is. I want a nice bright button. And then I'll go ahead and put in a foreground color of dark. So my background button or background, oh, you know what? I'm going to do yellow green instead. I like that yellow green. So now I've got a bright green button with some black text. Happy with that. I don't really need that border anymore. So I'm going to comment out, Control/. I'm going to get rid of that border. So now I've got the, all right, feeling pretty good about this. By the way, if I click on this little button, it is going to launch my email program and it's going to try to send an email. So that's kind of neat. So now it's really just a few aesthetic things. I'm going to do this as well. I'm going to go to my button and I'm going to give it a border radius of just like 2 pixels. This is just going to take the little points off of the corners of my button. So they're just a little bit more rounded. If I made it really obvious, it would stand out to you. So if I did 10 pixels, now you're really going to see that I got rounded corners on that button. Okay. I don't want them to be that roundy though. So I'm going to dial this back. How does 4 pixels look? I like 4 pixels. 4 pixels, it's noticeable that it's got roundy corners, but it doesn't, still seems like a rectangular button. I feel pretty good about this. Got my heading up there, got my name, got my text, little welcoming text. I got my button to email me. It's overlapping nicely with that picture. And remember, the nice thing about using this as a class means I can always go to some place on my web page and I can create more buttons. href equals nothing. Class equals button link. Put in some text. I've got another button. And there it is. It's already styled the way it's supposed to be. Cool. I can dig that. Hey, let's do this with the button though. Dot button link colon hover. When I hover over my button link, background color orange. So when I hover over my, let me test this real quick, make sure I'm showing you the right thing. I am. Good. And I'm going to copy that, put it in the chat. So notice there is no space at all in there. It's dot button link, which is my class, colon hover. Does the button link need a div ID in HTML? No, it does not. So you notice my little pretend button that I threw on down here is just kind of floating out in space. I don't like that necessarily. I like inline elements like anchors, like hyperlinks to be inside of something, but it's not necessary to be valid. That works perfectly fine. So you don't need a div ID in the HTML, although it is very rare for me to demonstrate just putting a hyperlink just out in space. And after class, I'm going to keep the recorder going, but I'll show you what I'm going to do with those buttons. And I'll end up having a button inside of something, maybe a figure. Maybe I'll do articles or something. I don't know yet. I'll make it up as I go. However, I'm pretty satisfied with this for our participation activity. I'm not signed into Blackboard at the moment. So I'm not going to go there and show you, but I promise you, if you were looking at the little picture in the participation 3B for the directions, pretty darn similar to this, you know? Two boxes, one of them slightly on top of the other. One of them has a photo. The other one has a little bit of styled text in there. This looks pretty darn good. Okay. So if you're satisfied with how your page is looking with those two blocks, that's your participation 3B, which means you do need to, on your code, you need to go to your original current index homepage and you need to make a hyperlink to it. Hey, href equals week 3 dash, there we go. And this is going to be styled blocks and text. Participation 3B. There you go. Don't forget, you always got to update that index page with those new hyperlinks. So update those. And then, of course, publish everything. And then go online and test it out. Always go online and test out your work and see how that's looking. Yeah. So I feel like our class was just a wee bit shorter. So I think that's fine with me. Like I said, I think I'm going to stick around a little bit longer, and I'm certainly happy to answer questions. And I will keep the recorder on. So if you can't hang out at the moment, you can always come back and check it out. Just so you know what my intention is here on this page. I'm already getting tired of that sandy brown, so I'm probably going to go over to coolers real quick and find another neutral soft color that I can use as a background color. And then I'm going to create some boxes down here, maybe 5 of them. And I want these boxes to be side by side. And I don't know exactly what I want to do with these boxes yet, but I think I want to have some kind of links in there and content. So maybe, since I'm doing some of the assignments, maybe not as many as you guys are, maybe I'll have links to some of my pages, so like if I look at my current page, yeah, you see, I've got these little hyperlinks up here. Yeah, I'm getting kind of bored with that. So I might have one of these little boxes will have some hyperlinks of the assignments that I'm working on. And maybe another one's going to have some good resources or something like that. So yeah, I just maybe future content. I plan on continuing to work on these pages throughout the term. So we'll probably come up with something neat. Yeah, code. You need the HTML except for the block. Let me jump over to my HTML here first, just so we can see what's going on. Not that one. Let's go to this one. And I'm going to ignore this. I'm going to actually delete that hyperlink. I'll be putting it back soon enough. But here's my HTML. So what's critical on here? Well, it's critical that these divs, especially the opening and closing div tags for these blocks, are well defined. So notice I've got a section and there's an opening and closing section tag. Within that opening and closing section, I've got this first div, ID text box, and then I've got this second div, ID photo box. So there was a couple of mistakes I saw with students very recently, and closing tags were, location were popped up in both examples. So that's an easy mistake to forget is, when those closing tags are, see what's contained in what. Now, of course, my photo box doesn't really contain very much, so nothing fancy there. But my first div contains quite a bit. Oh, okay. I actually commented out. My button is not in block style either. I put it in there short term and then took it out. And Daniel, can't find what they missed. Missing the CSS part that changes the size of the white background box. Okay. So let's first check this. My white background box has an ID text box. So that part's important. So there's my white background box, text box. And there's two things controlling the text box, right? Yeah, this is probably the most important one right here, though. It's got a background color. Of course, width and height are pretty important. It is actually weird that I did width and height in this order. I normally do width first and then height. This makes more sense to me, width and height. So there's my width property and my height property. And then this was nice. The transform property is what we use to kind of create that little overlap effect. It pushed the white box over and a little bit down. So out of curiosity, if I did not have that transform property in there, in fact, if I just comment it out, if I don't have the transform translate, that's where that white box is naturally. Now, don't forget, I also have like a negative margin on there of 50 pixels, which, okay, maybe even side by side, they don't look so bad. I'm going to uncomment that, Control/. Margin left, just an aesthetic thing. So with margin left, you don't even really notice it so much, but margin left, without that, I have bigger space over here on the left than I do over on the right. It's not bad. It's just a different way. It doesn't really, I like balance a lot in some websites. So put that back on there. Cool. And I will, before tonight is done, I will be publishing my page. So you'll also have access to it that way. So you'll see it. So I did correct my hyperlink. So I will be publishing, but I'm going to do a couple more things to this page first. Cool. Yeah. So when you're ready or later tonight, I'll probably do it while watching the game or something, big games, watch a lot of football. So let's go ahead and get to work here. Now, I understand our class time, I'm kind of officially ending it around 2:15. That's cool. So if you got to head out, no worries. Thank you. And I'll see you in about 5 days. And we're going to do some more cool webpage stuff. If you are sticking around with me, that's cool too. And I'm going to do a little bit more styling on this page. I'm going to keep my recorder going. So that way, when I post the recording, those who couldn't stick around can still access it and see what we did. I promise you too, the things I'm about to do on this page are things we are going to do as a class in future weeks as well. So I'm not going to be doing anything so new and crazy that this is the only time you can see it. What I'm going to do here is going to come up definitely mid-late term when we want to do website layouts, especially responsive layouts, so that they flex with mobile users and stuff. So I promise you, we will be hitting all of these as an official class topic. But this, what you see on my shared screen at the moment, is perfectly acceptable for participation 3B. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you later. If you're sticking around, stick around. So what I'm going to do for my next part, thank you. Have a good one. See you, Ryan. Excellent. I will be putting up that recording a little bit later this evening. See you, Devin. And so on my HTML, actually, let me move that index over so it's not in my way. So on my HTML, I'm going to create another section down here. ID equals, this is going to be my, I don't know, what do I want to call it? That's what's tough when I want to create something on a web page. I don't even know what it's ultimately going to be to come up with a good name for it. So what did I call the first one? Top section? That was pretty creative. How about bottom section? All right. Now this bottom section is going to end up having, it's going to have 5 divs. Here's how I'm going to do the divs, by the way. This is a neat little trick you can do in VS Code. I can write div *5 and then press my enter key. And it puts in 5 sets of opening and closing div tags. You may not have seen that. Don't tell anybody else that I showed it to you because I don't want them to do that. But basically you write in the element that you want, *5, no spaces, and then just press your enter key. It's in those 5 divs. I do that a lot when people aren't looking. Okay, so I've got those 5 divs in my bottom section. That's actually enough to start doing some design work. So I've got my ID bottom section. Let me jump over to my CSS, and I'm going to kind of do some things you may have seen before. bottom section. I'm going to give it a temporary border. Border, 4 pixels, solid red. Margin, 50 pixels on all 4 sides. And that's going to allow me to see that container. It's right down there. It's trying to collapse on itself, but it didn't quite make it. I'm actually surprised it didn't completely collapse on itself, but hey, we'll figure it out soon enough. Ooh, wait a minute. What do I have up here? I'm just checking to make sure there's nothing that's screwing me up for down at the bottom part. I don't think so, because I did section, top section. Okay. All right. So that's pretty good for now. I'm going to take this bottom section and yeah, happy with that. That's great. Bottom section, space divs. I'm going to style all 5 divs that are in that section. And one more question about the email button. Go for it, Denise. Question about my email button. Where's my email button? Oh, it's not there. It's on the HTML. Yeah. Hey, Denise. Oh, I see. I can't quite hear you. I can tell that you unmuted, though. Yeah, Denise, I can't hear you, even though I can tell you unmuted. So I don't know if that's still a microphone potential issue. So you might just have to type in your question in the chat. Can't make the email look like a button. Okay, well, here's one key thing that I did. Definitely, it's got a class on there, button link. Notice the capital L. Of course, you probably would have caught that one. And then on my button link, there it is, dot button link. Because it's a class, that dot is important. Class selector uses a dot. And then for the most part, padding is probably the most critical thing on there to make it button-y looking. The padding put some space around the text, and then I gave it more space on the left and the right. So that gives it a nice, good rectangular shape. Text decoration none gets rid of my underlining on the text. Of course, a bright background color, a dark foreground color, and border radius is what I used in order to just to notch off those corners. Let me put this in the chat. There we go. Cool. Now I've got my 5 divs in this bottom section. I'm going to go to my CSS and I'm going to style all 5 divs equally. I'm going to give them a border, temporarily probably, 4 pixels, solid blue. And I'm going to give them a margin of 10 pixels. And I'm going to give them a min height of 100 pixels. And this is going to allow you to see those 5 divs in there. And that's what divs want to do. They want to be one on top of the other because they're block elements. They want to be the full width of the page, or the full width of their parent anyway, because they're block elements. But I want these divs to be side by side. So I can go to my bottom section and I can put on a display flex. Display flex is going to put those 5 divs side by side. It's weird that the last one is more scrunched up looking than the others. I don't know what's causing that. Beats me. We'll figure it out soon enough, I guess. So now they're side by side, but now I'm going to do a little bit more display flex stuff. So for one thing, on my CSS, okay, this makes the section into a Flexbox parent. That's what that's doing. Now I'm going to do another one on here. This is going to be Flex Flow Row Wrap. You're not going to really notice this one so much, but basically this is just confirming that I want my little divs, my children, to be in a row, horizontal row, but I also want them to wrap when necessary. This means if the browser starts to get narrow, the little boxes will go back to being vertical instead of horizontal. So you're not going to really appreciate it too much. It's not going to really look any different yet, but I'll show you what it's doing very, very soon. Okay, feeling pretty good about that. Let's see. I'm also going to do this, I think. Justify content center. I think that's going to, yeah, I like that. Justify content center. Yep, it centers the children. Okay, so now those little blocks are centered down there. They still look all scrunched up because they don't have any content. So now to fix that scrunched up nature, what I'm going to do is down here in my bottom section div, I'm going to do the word flex. So there's a flex property, and I'm going to do 1, 0, 50, no, auto. I want, I think that's what I want. Yeah, that's what I want. Okay, so I don't want to talk too much about this one because this definitely is going to come up in class, but this is going to be the, this is the grow, shrink, and the basis. I know those words don't make a lot of sense, but I'll use them more in future classes. And basically that does allow those 5 boxes to really expand out and take up space. Now, I'm also going to do this. They've got a margin, they've got a min height of 100 pixels. I'm going to give them a min width of 100 pixels as well. So they'll always be at least 100 pixels wide, but they can be wider. Now, check this out. If I was looking at this page and it was narrower, so I'm going to go to my browser here and make it narrower. Notice how those boxes are, it's 4 on one row and then one big one at the bottom. If I go even narrower, it's 3 on one row, then 2 on the bottom. And if I go really narrow, how narrow can I go? I can't go that narrow, but it's 2, 2, and then 1. So my 5 boxes can easily rearrange for narrower devices. This is not the best it could be. And obviously the top part is all kinds of messed up. We'll have to fix that soon enough. But that's one of the benefits of using display flex, and then particularly that flex flow. That's what's coming in handy right down there. So, all right, feeling pretty good about that. I think I like that. Okay, so I've got those little blocks down there. Happy with that. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to put I do want to have a little button on each of them. Keep going to that page. I don't want to be on that page. I want to be on this page. I'm going to put a little button on each of these. Ooh, I think I can show you this little trick too. This might be kind of neat. I think this will work. Let's say I want 5 divs, but I want a hyperlink in each of those divs. So I think I can write it this way. Div times 5, angle bracket, A. Now, if I press enter, it gives me 5 divs and it puts a hyperlink in each of them. Oh, this is even better. Definitely don't tell me who's with me still. Just 3 people, Kelsey, Marshall, and Reagan. Okay. Don't do this for yourself, even though I will never know that you did this. Okay. I'm going to do div times 5 child anchor dot button link. So what this should do, it's going to give me 5 divs. Each one is going to have an anchor tag in it. And each of those anchor tags is going to have a class button link. When I press enter, there we go. So now I've got those 5 buttons in there. Cool. And of course, I can just go to my text. Now when I do buttons like this, you might be tempted to put like click me or click here or something like that. I want you to avoid that habit because that's not good for usability. Buttons should always or all hyperlinks, whether they're buttons or not, hyperlinks should always kind of describe their content so the user knows what to expect. Of course, the problem is I don't know what I'm doing with all this stuff yet. This is just kind of a mock-up, a layout. So in the short term, I could put things like button text, but I'll just go ahead and just put in some random little letters just so I can see that these things are getting styled up. So I've got 5 divs and they all have hyperlinks in them. And there's my little buttons for each of those little divs right in there. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about this, and I'm not going to keep you too much longer, mostly because I just don't know what I want to do with these things yet, So I wanted to have a place for content, but not sure what I want to do. I do know that that red border on the section, that border was there temporarily. I only wanted that in the short term. So I'm going to go get rid of that red border on that section. And that's going to leave me just with those 5 boxes. Cool. I like that. I'm also going to do this. I'm going to take my bottom section. No, I'm going to take my bottom section div and I'm going to do position relative. Okay. So my intention now is I like these little hyperlinky buttons. I want each button to be in the lower right corner of each blue block. Okay. By default, they're in the top left corner. I want them to be in the lower right corner. And I think I like that they overlap a little bit. I want the button to overlap a little bit in the lower right. Not all the way to the right, but mostly to the right. So basically, I'm putting position relative on all 5 of my divs. Now, bottom section descendant, so space dot button link. All button links that are in my bottom section. Those are all going to be display block. They're all going to have a width of 80 pixels. They're all going to have a height of 35 pixels. Just doing that is going to start to change some things. My buttons, look at that text. It all looks, it's not quite centered and stuff. It's a little bit messed up. Here's how I can fix that. Padding 8 pixels. I think that'll fix it. Will that fix it? Yes, it does fix it. Okay, pretty good with that. I'm going to make that width 120 though. I think that'll look a little bit better. Okay, so all of my anchor tags that are in the bottom section are now block elements. They all have the same width and height, 120 by 35. They've got a little padding on there. Now here's where I can really control their position. Position absolute, and I'm going to go bottom 0 pixels, right 0 pixels. So position absolute, 0 from the bottom, 0 from the right. That's not where they're going to end up. I'm going to fine tune it, but I always like to start with a 0, 0 first. And that's going to put all those buttons in the bottom right corners of those blue containers. All right. Well, I don't want them to be 0 right. I want them to be maybe 20 pixels from the right. And that's going to nudge them over to the left a little bit. All right. I'm feeling pretty good about that. And I don't want them to be 0 from the bottom. I want them to be negative 17 pixels from the bottom. Let's just do negative 10. That's going to have them overlap a little bit on the bottom. Could have done more. Negative 20. Come on. There they go. A little bit further down. All right. Feeling pretty good about that. My text isn't centered. I wish it was. So I'm going to do this. Text align center. Now this works because my anchors are now block elements. So this is actually going to center the text within my blocky anchors. And so I want that text centered in the space. Notice all these buttons are the same width though. I'm good with that. I wanted that. It's right up here. They're all 120 pixels wide. And I think that's pretty good. Now, if these little divs were taller, like if they had a min height of 200 pixels, that's okay. Because my anchors are still positioned based on the bottom right coordinates of that particular blue block. So I think I'm all right with that. Now, I even like the borders on there, but I don't like the blue on that sandy brown. So let me just do a quick little side trip. Coolers. I want to spend a lot of time exploring. I just want to get a neutral color. Actually, that baby pink looks pretty decent to me. Let me lock it in. I want a light neutral. That green looks pretty good. I mean, ooh, that light green there looks pretty good. I'll lock that one in. All right, I'm going to go for baby pink. DFBBB1. DFBBB1. All right, so that's going to be on my code all the way up to the body. Hashtag DFBBB1. Is that it? I think so. Yeah, actually, I do like that better. It's a nice neutral color. Looks almost like mauve. Okay. And now I can get a better color for that blue border. Actually, that plum looks really good. I like that. And I think I can copy it. Copy the hex. Copy the hex code for that plum. Jump over here. Go back down there. And instead of that 009, I'll just paste. Oops, I need my hashtag. There we go. Now I got that plum color. Oh yeah, I definitely like that better. Now, in order to tie this accent color in, here's something that I think will look pretty good. I want to take that plum and I want to add a visual plum element up at the top, probably just a border right across the top. I think that'll help bring that color. So that way it doesn't look like it's just on the bottom. So I'm going to head, actually, I'm going to copy this line, copy that border, go all the way up to my body, paste, and I'm just going to do a border top. I'll do 8 pixels, make it a little bit thicker. And that's going to give me that line right up at the very top. And it's very subtle, but I think it helps to tie in the color from the top to the bottom. Yeah. Ooh, let's go a little, hopefully we're not going overboard here. Let's copy that color. Let's go to my heading 1. Make that a color for the heading 1. Oh, perfect. I like it. Okay. So now I've got the color on the heading 1, that top border visual element. It's going to be on those borders down there for those boxes at the bottom. Yeah, looks good on the background. That lime green might not be the best mix, but I think that's okay for now. I can always change that up later on once I figure out what I'm doing there. So I think I'm going to call that good for now. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick publish. Win SCP. Go to my site. Okay, so I'm in my styles folder on my server. I'm in my styles folder on my local machine. There's my style sheet that I worked on today. I'll just drag that over to the right. And I'm just looking at the dates too. So what is it? It's October 7th at 2:30. So October 7th, 2:30, that's correct. Let me go up one level. Up one level. Let's go to my images folder on the server, images folder locally. And I need to take my waterfall picture, publish the waterfall picture to the images folder. October 7th from 1:30, so about an hour ago. All right, go up one level, up one level. I'm going to take my HTML file from today. Notice there's 2 files that I've worked on today. My participation 3B and my index. So I'm going to select both of those, click, control, click. I've updated my index. I'm going to drag both of those over. Now those are both going to be, let's see, there's October 7th. And there's October 7th. So they're both over there. I could always sort by the change date too, and that'll put my files next to each other by date. All right, I think they're good. So I go to test. On my website, go to the 195 section. Okay, there's styled blocks and text, participation 3B, click on that one. And looks like everything's loading up. Cool. So I'm happy with that for now. My email link still works. Cool. Happy with the colors, layout. All right, so that is it. So yeah, what was the really weird new thing we did? It was basically just having, instead of just 2 block elements, having 5 block elements. And the real key to getting those 5 block elements side by side is display flex. That's the big thing right there. The flex flow is nice, but you don't really see it until you start making responsive web pages. And justify content was pretty nice too. However, if I took justify content out, you wouldn't even notice it. Since all my boxes are maxed out in their width, the value of justified content is kind of lost. I'm still going to leave it in there though. And this was a big one too, even though we don't know what it means yet. So the flex property with 1-0 auto, that was a nice one. Position relative on the parent allows me to do position absolute on the child. So what's weird is my divs, they're both a parent and a child. My divs are a parent to the button, but my divs are a child to the bottom section. So, all right. Well, Kelsey, Reagan, thanks for hanging out with me. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recorder and I'll stop sharing unless you have a follow-up question for now.
Oh, I did have a quick question.
Let's hear it.
So it might be easier if I can share my screen, but I'm wondering how to center the buttons within the 5 items things.
Ooh, that's good. Actually, before I turn off my recorder, let me show that because it is a little bit weird and I think it'll be nice to have that in the recording. So I like that. So the buttons to be centered down there. So here's what I would do. I'd head over to my code, to my styles, and right down here. So instead of going 20 pixels from the right, I'm going to go from the left. Not that I have to go from the left, but it makes more sense. I'm going to go from the left 50%. That's not going to be completely correct. I have to do something else to correct that. So negative 20 pixels from the bottom, 50% from the left. And that's going to get the buttons looking like this. You're like, well, that didn't do anything. It actually did. You can't tell, but the left edge of each button is exactly 50%. Okay, but now I need to move those buttons over. So I'm going to follow that up with transform, translate. This time I'm just going to do translate X, negative 50%. Let me test this real quick, and then I'll explain what I'm doing. I misspelled translate. There it is. So now, come on, refresh. And I think transform, translate X. That looks like it's spelled. Let me try this just to make sure. I'm going to do negative 60 pixels. Oh, I'm looking at the online version. I need to be looking at my local version. I need to be looking at, hold on. Where'd my page go? Nope, that's online. Ah, there it is. Okay. Okay, let me backtrack a little bit so that you can see these steps working. I was looking at the web base, the web page that's on the web. And since I haven't republished the CSS, of course, we're not going to see it. So let me go back and I'm going to put this, take that out. And then I'm going to put this back to what it was. It was right. I don't know, 20 pixels, let's say. Okay, that's where it was. Cool. Now I'm going to change this right to left 50%. And that's not going to look dramatically different, but the left edge of these buttons is exactly 50 at the 50% mark. So then I have a choice. Well, not a big choice though. Transform, translate X. So translate X is similar to the translate, except this time we're just going to do the horizontal X movement. And I'm going to do negative 60 pixels. And that gets those buttons centered. Okay. So my question for you is, little trivia question. Why did I choose negative 60 pixels?
Is it because the width is 120?
That's exactly why. So the width of the button is 120 pixels. So by moving it 60 pixels to the left, that gets me a centered button. Now, what if I want to change my width of my buttons from 120 to 130 or 140? Well, then I have to keep doing the math. So instead of doing negative 60 pixels, I could do negative 50%. And that's going to give me the same look, because the negative 50% here is a negative 50% of the width of the item, no matter what the item is. So if this button was 170 pixels wide, the buttons will be wider, but they're still centered. Or if they were really small, maybe they were just 60 pixels wide, they're going to be smaller, but still centered. Okay, so I'll go back to 120 for now. And that negative 50% doesn't have to change because it's a percentage, a relative unit, as opposed to a pixel, which is a fixed unit. Okay. So the trick there, my positioning, I'm positioning it 50% from the left of the purple block, and then I'm adjusting or nudging my hyperlink 50% of its width to the left. So I am kind of counteracting something. Doing a left 50% nudges it too far to the right, so I have to go back to the left a little bit. And that is a nice look. I do like that. Creates a little bit more balance. And there's still little buttons that are clicky. They don't go anywhere at the moment, though. All right. Let me, I still have WinSEP open. Let's see. I don't think I changed my web page at all. I'll republish anyway, but I definitely changed my styles. So let me republish my style sheet. And now I always like to test online. So there, click, click, refresh. Ooh, hard refresh. Hard refresh. Control F5 for hard refresh. That makes sure you're looking at the latest version of everything. And looks like my buttons are centered. Okay. So if you need to follow up on that, you can always right click, view my page source code. You'll see my HTML. And if you click on the CSS link up there within the code, you'll see all the styles. Yeah, so I'm probably going to make this my index page. I think that'll look better. All right.
Hey, thank you. I'm going to head out.
Okay, see you later.